Gotta remember to do that. Lesson for being out there in the heat. That's all I can say. You know, it's hot just standing outside, and it's hotter, another, what, 20, 30 degrees hotter on that pavement riding across. So, yeah, haven't seen Katie yet. I know our speaker will be on about 10 to 15 after Mason, so he's not going to tune in right at noon, from what I understand.
Okay.
Well, we can tell those who are not on Ragbri from those who are tuning in, so. Just be, well, as hot as it is tomorrow, they probably won't be as active around town. But it will still be a mess. I think they said at Sioux City they had let 29,000 official riders versus 10, which they'd allowed in the past. So you have probably 50,000 riders starting at Sioux City. So we'll have that at least here, along with all their supply equipment. Always a good time, though.
Well, if it's anything like Iowa State games here, they have a certain amount of ticket holders, right?
Right.
And then about 40 to 50,000 extras that are not actually going into the stadium. So I
Right.
assume we'll have very much the same here in Ames. We'll have all the official riders and then double that for people just coming to party.
Yep.
People like Deb.
Yep. They people who are on a day trip between Ames and Des Moines.
We'll give folks another minute or two to log on, Karen. I know we've got a few minutes before our speaker. So will you let me know when the speaker's on, please?
Well,
And is Katie on? Oh, yep, I see her. Well, Karen, I'm going to run to my office real quick. I'll be right back, okay?
all righty.
1 sec.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Go ahead and get us started here. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance. You want to bring up that slide, Karen?
So, oh,
Stand. Join me. There it is. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if you wouldn't mind remaining standing, we have some sad news to pass along. Del Bloom passed away last Friday, July 21st, and Del's funeral will be Friday, August 18th at the First Methodist Church at 516 Kellogg Avenue. And we'll be sure to get this information out. There's a visitation at 10 a.m., followed by the church services at 11 a.m., with a lunch to follow at the church. And Grandin Funeral and Cremation are handling all the services. So certainly want to take a moment to remember Del and all of his contributions to the community, family, and to our Rotary Club. So certainly keep the Bloom family and Georgia in mind. So let's just take a moment. Thank you. Are there any others in our Rotary family that we should keep in mind today? Okay. I'm not sure if there's, go ahead and take a seat. And I'm not sure if there's any guests on the call today, but I think, John, are you queued up for us today?
is John there? He was on.
I saw him on, but I wonder if he's having technical difficulties.
There he is. There's John.
I think he's singing,
John,
but we can't hear
John,
him.
we can't hear you. You're not on mute.
Yeah, you're off of mute, so I don't know if he's having a problem with the speakers, but
Well, we know the song, so I guess
All good. We know the song well, and I'm not going to sing it because that's going to get people logged off really fast. So we know the song in our head, John. So we'll go from here. Okay, next slide, Karen. All right, so Shelterbox USA. So Killa Price, who's the club president for the Rotary Club of Aledo, Texas. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but we'll be traveling across Iowa on RAGBRAI promoting Shelterbox USA. And Tuesday afternoon from 3:30 to 9, Killa will be at the KHOI radio to demonstrate what is included in a shelter box. If anybody's interested and in town and would like to check that out, she invites all Rotarians, family, and friends to stop by to meet her and learn more about what shelter box is. So if you're around, certainly come by and check that out and see, check out the festivities on RAGBRAI. So hopefully it won't be too hot. I know the temps look a little blistering this week for the good folks on RAGBRAI, and I'm sure we have some Rotary members that are out there as well. So be thinking of them. Hopefully they're staying hydrated with water during the daytime. So what happens in the evening is up to them. But should be a good time. And I know I've signed up for one of the beer tents to help tear down late tomorrow night. So if I'm sure there's plenty of spots available for you to go out to the Discover Ames website, and there's a link for volunteers on there. So it's never too late to go out and try to find an opportunity to help out. I'm sure there's still quite a few left openings available. So check that out. So Karen, has our speaker joined yet? Not yet. Okay. Well, typically save this for the end of the meeting, and I'll repeat it, but definitely want you all to join us next week at the Plex. We'll be back there for a riveting conversation. I've actually had a chance to hear Brent Bloom talk about We Will Collective at an economic development board meeting, and he's got a fabulous story to tell about the how and why and kind of what led up to the current NIL landscape, and what he and his team at We Will Collective are looking to accomplish. He'll be able to dispel some preconceived notions that are out there and give us all some great information in what they're doing to help support Iowa State athletics. And for anybody that has some personal or professional success stories that they want to share, we are bringing back the brag bucket, and it's been missing for a little while, and it's time to bring it back. And I'll be the first one to drop some money in there, as I did my brag last week about my boys' state championship baseball team. So looking forward to bringing that back. So if you have some stories you'd like to share personally, professionally, we will have it ready for you. So come prepared, and we'll also we'll have a little fun in addition to the brag bucket to kick off our meeting next week. So you won't want to miss that. I'm not going to give you any more hints than that. So show up. All right. Is Karen, you're muted. Is our speaker on yet?
Not yet. He just joined. Katie says yes.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
I'm Steven.
Right.
Joining us.
Okay. All right.
Looks like he's connecting to audio. So let me pause for just a couple seconds. He's kind of been on and off.
Hopefully the technology will work.
I know it all hangs on.
Otherwise, you'll have to give the presentation.
I know. I'm like,
Hello.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. All
Yogi,
right.
Can you share your video so we can see your face?
Yes. Sorry.
There we go.
Oh, welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm going to hand it right over to Katie without further ado. Katie, if you want to do an introduction of our guest speaker today, we're very excited to hear what he has to say.
Yes, I would love to. So good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you all. So Dr. Joachim Repman, which he goes by Yogi, was born in Flensburg, which is the state of I even practiced this, Yogi, and I'm struggling. State of Schleswig-Holstein, Germany. In 1957, which is a border town to Denmark at the Baltic Sea, north of Hamburg. And just a little side note, Yogi and I had a fun conversation. My husband and I lived in Hamburg for about 6 months right after we were married. And so I got to chat with Yogi about that, which was really cool. Not a lot of people know that area. So that was really fun. And then in 1984, he completed his master's thesis entitled Transplanted Ideas, the Concept of Freedom and Democracy of the Schleswig-Holstein 48ers, which is the 1848ers, Origins and Effects from 1846 to 1856. Also, Yogi has written several books on notable Schleswig-Holstein immigrants and the mass migration to the United States. He served as professor of German at St. Olaf and Carleton Colleges in Northfield, Minnesota. And the Steuben Society of America's History Award 2014 was presented to him for his research on the 1848 movement's democratic impact in Germany and the USA. So please welcome Yogi for this insightful presentation about the German immigration to the state of Iowa.
All right. Hello.
We can hear you perfect. That's great.
Thank you. Thank you. This is, first of all, Yogi Repman, thank you for having me since 1995. Actually, my wife, Gitta from Hamburg, and myself, we are professional Rotarians at RC Northfield, Minnesota. The first slide which we saw is a church in downtown Frankfurt, which transformed 1848 into the very first German democratic parliament, which was a sensation in Paris. A revolution had started early 1848. Paris was known for quality revolutions since 1789, the first French Paris Revolution. And this one in 1848 was spreading all over Europe. And for the first time in German history, in this very building, where Kennedy, for example, gave a speech in 1962, the first parliament assembled. Next slide, Karin. Next slide, please.
I think she's trying to. Hang on one second. A little technical. Oh, there we go.
Next slide.
Next one.
Thank you. This is northern Germany. Katie will feel itchy feet because of the excessive nightlife, which is Hamburg known for. This is to the south. At the bottom, you see the city-state of Hamburg. Then you have Schleswig-Holstein, the northernmost German state. I am from Flensburg to the very north, just half a mile south of Denmark. And what is important at this point is a little bit east of Hamburg. The southeastern quarter of Schleswig-Holstein is Lauenburg, and we will talk about it. The green part, just to give you an idea, that was already communistic East Germany through 1989. The Iron Curtain was next to my home state, next to Hamburg. Next slide, please. This is Dr. Gabriel Rieser, a Jewish lawyer from Hamburg, and in 1848, for a duchy, which was located a little bit east of Hamburg, in what is nowadays Schleswig-Holstein, he was voted into the parliament in Frankfurt, and he became the vice president. Charismatic speeches, emancipation of the Jews. He finally became the first Jewish German judge. So quite a character, and he also was visiting Davenport, Iowa. Next slide, please. This is, thank you, this is a book of main speeches of Gabriel Rieser in this Frankfurt parliament, written, edited by Uwe Barschel. Uwe Barschel was a young governor in Schleswig-Holstein. Many people thought he ought to be the next German chancellor. But in 1985, when he was running for re-election, there was a very strong, charismatic, good-looking ladies' man type, Kennedy type opponent, and Uwe Barschel and his office had dirty tricks. Like Watergate, that scandal was called Waterkant Gate. Waterkant is the seashore in Low German, and that's the name of the scandal. Next slide, please. This is the governor. That he was not re-elected, and the scandal, like with Nixon, President Nixon, was unfolding, and Hamburg journalists found him in a bathtub dead in Geneva, Switzerland. In the beginning, most of us, I was sure that guy committed suicide because of the scandal and. But then we found out there were big illegal deals with weapons, Israel Mossad, German Secret Services, CIA, German CIA were involved. So through today, we do not know for sure how Uwe Barschel, the governor, who 4 weeks before the scandal unfolded, had published the book about the wonderful speeches of Gabriel Rieser in 1848. Next slide, please. The governor, when I was in college of Schleswig-Holstein, here, Dr. Stoltenberg, and even though in his days, in those days, we were politically extremely left and whatever, and now I'm in his paying member in the conservative German Christian Democratic Union of Angela Merkel and so on. And this governor was a trained historian, and he felt sorry for two young history students, and he gave money in 1978. So for the first time, my buddy and I could visit Iowa. Next slide, please. Karin, next slide, please. No, these are 5 too many. Wow, it is technically more difficult than I had expected. We are 5 or 3 slides ahead of the story, Karin, because now it's getting really Iowa at its best. So we have to go back. Next slide.
There is a delay, Yogi, because of the
sorry, Kari, I should not have been born according to a high school teacher. Go next slide, please. I did a mistake. I was wrong. I expected something else. I can start. Dr. Stoltenberg, as a very young politician, this governor who was very, very close to be chancellor. Next slide. He was visiting already 2 years after the Second World War, America, invited by the American government. And after a tour all over America, 6 weeks, he was asked the last week, Mr. Stoltenberg, what do you like to do? And he said, as a good German history student, oh, I would love to see Harvard. And at Harvard University, Henry Kissinger, who just turned 100, was teaching in his first semester history. And here, because of the support of that German governor, his very best friend, from both sides became Henry Kissinger in 1947. And Henry, as you know, was born and raised near Nuremberg, Bavaria. And once a year, his Jewish parents, before Christmas, bought marzipan from my home state, Lübeck marzipan. And when I had the pleasure with one of my Carleton College students to visit Henry, because the last book of Dr. Stoltenberg, he wanted to make a video commentary. I gave him at the end 100 gram, a little box of these Lübeck marzipan. Little did I know. And Henry became so emotional. He had tears in his eyes. And since then, we have a marzipan, Lübeck, Schleswig-Holstein friendship. Next slide, please. This is Theodor Olshausen, the leading 1848 revolutionary from Schleswig-Holstein, son of a Lutheran pastor. 1848, Schleswig-Holstein still for 500 years was part of Denmark. Nobody spoke Danish, so the Schleswig-Holstein revolutionaries wanted to get out of Denmark, and he was the leader. Next slide, please. There was a liberation army of 1848ers. Next slide, please. And these are the veterans. Those Schleswig-Holsteiners who fought against Denmark for independence. And as you know, the revolution failed all over Europe. It failed in Germany, and it failed in Schleswig-Holstein. We saw a group photo, and these are the veterans of the Schleswig-Holstein army against Denmark, and they all, in a chain migration, went from Schleswig-Holstein, Hamburg, New Orleans, to Davenport, Scott County, Iowa. So 1846, there had been the very first group of my North Germans, Schleswig-Holstein, countrymen who came to Davenport, wrote letters back home and said, no, it's a little bit too fast. Let's go back one slide. We want to start, we cannot live in a state owned by the Danish king. We have no democracy. We want to go to the Republic of America. Here are 5 veterans of that Schleswig-Holstein army liberty movement against Denmark. And I just want to point out the guy to the very right, Christian Müller, who started a very famous, successful dynasty of lumber company in Davenport. And he was the mover and shaker of the Turnverein, the gymnastic Turnverein, which was a concept from Germany, from Europe, and he founded it in 1852. The first speaker of this Turnverein, which also had an intellectual dimension, was Theodor Gulich, who had started the first newspaper. This is 1857. Next slide. The first Turner Hall in Davenport, Iowa. Next slide, please. That is the first Turner Hall with this leadership of Christian Müller and Theodor Gulich. Next slide, please. Some years later, a whole block in downtown Davenport was this Turner Hall. The motto was freedom, education, and well-being for all. In 1854, 2 years after the founding of that first Turnverein in Davenport, there was the first public appearance. The new flag of the Turnverein was dedicated and introduced with a big, huge gala event, all night dancing, speeches to the public. And there were 4 ladies who had broidered that leg. And I introduce you 2 of these amazing, forgotten, unknown 1848 ladies. This is Tilde Peters. She spoke 4 languages, just wrote poems, founded a support association during the Civil War in Devonport, and. Next slide, please. This is Elizabeth Clausen, who married Christian Müller, and her father was one of these famous charismatic politicians, speakers in the Frankfurt 1848 German parliament. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, Karin. This is the traveling trunk of Hans Reimer Clausen. You met the daughter in that frame in the painting is Christian Müller, the main mover and shaker and founder of the Turnverein. He married the daughter of Hans Reimer Clausen, whom you just have seen. The only trunk of these 800 politicians who gathered in 1848 in the Frankfurt Parliament, which survived in Devonport by all places, was given as a gift. Dorothy Müller, to the very right, eccentric, most charming millionaire lady. I hate to hurt the feelings of everybody in listening now, but Dorothy is our favorite Iowa lady for all times. She phoned us on a Sunday and said, well, I know you guys research about 1848er. My great-great-grandfather, or my great-grandfather, Hans Reimer Clausen, I have the trunk. You will get it. And here, Christian Müller, the son-in-law, and Glenn Sievers, the big farmer in Scott County, a Low German guy. And in the trunk, next slide. Karin, next slide, please. In the trunk, which is now in the living room of our Flensburg German apartment, were authentic documents from the government, which was formed to fight with the Liberty Army against Denmark. Here is a special passport for Hans Reimer Clausen in order to visit the King of Prussia in Berlin to get support. Every museum in Germany would like to have that trunk. We still keep it. We will finally donate it, but it made national news when we moved that trunk from Dorothy Müller-Horten. She died 3-4 years ago in Devonport. It's in Flensburg. Next slide, please. The big, most famous leader of the 1848er movement in Germany became finally this Karl Schurz from Cologne. He was a fairly young student supporting his professor, and he became world famous already in 1850. His professor was in Spandau, Berlin, in a prison, and he got him out over the Baltic Sea to England. There he met his later wife. She founded the first kindergarten in Watertown, Wisconsin. Next slide, please. One of the best buddies, drinking buddies from the Revolution days is this gentleman, Abraham. He became the leading pediatrician physician for kids in New York. The New York Times had long obituaries when he died. Next slide, please. A Jewish background. This is a photo of the good old days when both Karl Schurz and Mr. Abramson were young buddies. Next slide, please. I should say Karl Schurz became a senator of Missouri in Washington, and then the first German-born and only so far Secretary of Interior Affairs under President Hayes. This is again Gabriel Rieser. You recall the Jewish Hamburg lawyer who became the first judge after Germany was founded, 1871, from east of Hamburg. Next slide, please, Karin. Again, his friend, Theodor Holzhausen, they met at law school. And when Theodor Holzhausen had started his first newspaper, 1830, in Schleswig-Holstein, Gabriel Rieser wrote long articles about the emancipation of the Jewish community. And Denmark, and Schleswig-Holstein was part of Denmark, was far ahead of most countries in dealing and treating the Jewish community much, much better, long before other countries changed their laws. Next slide, please. Theodor Holzhausen, newspaperman, lawyer, friend of Gabriel Rieser, came to Davenport, Iowa, 1856. 1851, Theodor Gulich, the speaker, charismatic intellectual who had said in 1854, with the first public appearance of the Turnverein, we need equal rights for the women. Sensational for 1854, but the Turnverein, these 1848ers, were 100 years ahead of their time. Then Theodor Holzhausen, excluded from the amnesty of the Danish king, came to Davenport and took over that German newspaper, Der Demokrat, from Theodor Gulich, from 1856 to 1860, shortly before the Civil War started. He moved to St. Louis, took over the Westliche Post, the second largest German-speaking newspaper west of New York. And in 1870, we had 1,700 German daily and weekly and monthly publications. And this was one of the biggest you can see for a newspaper, quite an office building. Next slide, please. I can start talking. Next slide, please. This is Joseph Pulitzer, known for the Pulitzer Prize. Born 1847, a Hungarian, German-speaking Jewish background. He worked with his very first job as a young journalist for that German newspaper. And then after that, he made this amazing career, which ended up with this super, super famous Pulitzer Prize. Next slide, please. These are the veterans in Davenport, downtown at the Mississippi, where we have now the German American Heritage Center. What happened? This is 1898. 50 years after the revolution had started in Schleswig-Holstein, in our case, especially against Denmark. These were the veterans who were still alive. They had donated money for that monument commemorating March 24th, 1848, the beginning of the Schleswig-Holstein revolution. This stone had been 4 tons heavy, but what happened? Next slide, please. During the First World War, there was a strong, rampant anti-German hysteria in America. Every American with German roots was supposed to be supporting the German Kaiser against the American army. April 1917, America entered the First World War, and that stone, 4 tons, was destroyed, probably pushed into the Mississippi, we don't know. But 2005, Scott Christensen, the leading 1848er historian living in Iowa City, all his ancestors are from Schleswig-Holstein, going back to these 48ers, the American Schleswig-Holstein Heritage Society, Walcott, Scott County, and Corey Darnell, Schützenpark, donated money, and now we have a stone 16 tons at the same spot. On the other side of the road is the German American Heritage Center. On the German side, the capital of Schleswig-Holstein, Kiel, known for the Kiel Canal, has the main university, and the Grand Avenue through the university campus is Olshausen Street. And I think 2011, July 4th, we gathered some money and we are commemorating the 2 brothers, Theodor Olshausen and Justus Olshausen, as 48ers. And Theodor came back at the end of his life. He moved to Switzerland. And here is Dr. Bruno Olshausen, a direct descendant from the Olshausens in St. Louis through 1938 with that huge newspaper. And Dr. Bruno Olshausen has a team of 30 people doing brain research at Berkeley and Stanford, California. Next slide, please. The dream is, and now I hope that all of you guys are motivated to support us to have a commemoration in Davenport and in Schleswig-Holstein, commemorating Theodor Olshausen, Gabriel Riese, because Gabriel Riese in 1856 was visiting his buddy Theodor Olshausen in Davenport, and after some months he returned via Cuba back to Hamburg. And this story about the 48ers, we lost them. It was a brain drain for Europe, for Germany, for Schleswig-Holstein. You guys in America had all these wonderful, amazing people because of the failed revolution. And it's really fair to say, you guys are the descendants of this brilliant and bright 48ers. And we Germans nowadays are the descendants of the dingbats who stayed home. So please help us make that happen. 75 years ago, the parliament was founded. Thank you very much. Let's go to the next slide, please, before we start the questions. It is only to lure you over, Americans. Next slide, please, Karin. Americans tend to go to Bavaria, Munich, Oktoberfest, or Berlin, party time. Katie is already an exception with her husband in Hamburg. But next slide, please. I wanted to show you the best beer in the world and the brewery, which is in my hometown, Flensburg Pils.
There we go.
No, that's the other way around. If it's not available, it's fine, Karin. Then we just stop.
Here you go.
I thought it's kind of... No, next slide is the thank you, and then actually 2 slides more. Yeah, well, this is behind the brewery slide. This is my high school in Flensburg, founded 1566 by the Danish king. In Flensburg, moin moin is howdy, cheers, goodbye, hello. We even have a weekly newspaper called Moin Moin, and that's the name of my website, moin-moin.us. Next slide. We have a slide about Flensburg, Minnesota, a tiny town, 246 inhabitants. Polish immigrants founded it. This is Flensburg, where the Second World War ended. After Hitler had committed suicide, April 19th, hours before, in his will, Hitler had decided that the admiral of the Nazi army, Admiral Dönitz, would be his successor, Chancellor of Germany and leader of the Nazi party. And the Navy Academy in Flensburg, which is still around, was untouched. So that Dönitz went May 1st to that building and started a government for the last days in Flensburg at the fjord overlooking to Denmark. There's the summer castle of the Danish Queen, just minutes away from our Flensburg home. And that's where you get the very, very best hot dog on this planet. Here is the summer castle of the Danish Queen and the hot dogs nearby. You must try the Danish hot dog, and you never ever will be tempted, even when you are drunk like a sailor, to taste any hot dog in any country, including America. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your patience. Karin was wunderbar. I enjoyed working with Katie in Eurotarian. Katie, you will have a wonderful career in Rotary. Thank you, and let's have question and answers.
Thank you, Yogi. Yeah, please, if you do have questions, let's type them into the chat. And Yogi, can you see the chat function at all, or do we need to kind of queue up the questions for you?
Good question. I am here now. I press, oh, yes, video. I participate. Chat. Yes, I can see the chat.
Okay.
You
all right.
One new message.
I'm going to put one in the chat here for you just to make sure it works.
I read, please type question. Why did we choose Iowa? Very good question. Thank you. Mason.
Yep, that's me. Yep.
Wunderbar. Straight A+. I never got those grades in my high school career. The story is, and this is a talk by itself, we historians use the concept of push and pull forces. That means, what were the pull forces for immigrants? And liberty, freedom, but mainly farmhands. Most people were poor in Europe, in Germany, in Schleswig-Holstein. They were working hard and could not feed their families. But in America, you could buy or even get land, 1864, for free. So these were the pull forces from America. The push forces, social economic reasons, and living under the Danish king in autocracy, no democracy, no freedom. So then the next step is that 1846, the first Schleswig-Holsteiner, whysoever, ended up in Scott County, and to this day, the topsoil is very, very good, maybe the best in America. And he started farming and wrote letters back to Schleswig-Holstein And then in 1847, I mentioned that, the first two larger groups came from Hamburg via New Orleans, up the Mississippi, St. Louis, and then to Devonport. And there were the first people in that group who had quite a bit of money already. So that was the jump start. But the 48ers, they were starting what became orchestra, newspaper, the schooling education system. In the Turner Hall, once a week, academic talks were given. And so that is the background. And then because of the First and Second World War, this legacy of the 1840 era was nearly forgotten. Next question. Contribution of the 48ers was impressive for Devonport and around the US. Did any of the 48ers? Yes. They were homesick. The question is from Tom. Dear Tom, excellent question again. Yes, there was a group, for example, Schleswig-Holstein, after another war, Bismarck, Prussia against Denmark, 1864, became a Prussian province, but not really democracy. And so that province government tried to lure Theodor Olshausen back from back from St. Louis to Schleswig-Holstein. He was visiting his old buddies, but they had become monarchists under the Prussian king. So he moved finally to Zurich, Switzerland. But some other European, German 48ers became politicians in the Reichstag in Berlin, where Bismarck was the powerhouse and the Prussian king. Yes, there was a return migration, not a gigantic one, but some. Bismarck, for example, became a close friend of Karl Schurz, and that's kind of amazing. Karl Schurz, this liberal young student, getting his professor out of the prison in Spandau. And his biggest enemy was Bismarck, Otto von Bismarck. North Dakota, when it was founded as a state, the capital of that state is named after this German power politician. But then Schurz under Lincoln became American ambassador in Spain and had to go through Prussia. And Bismarck invited him and found out what is the favorite Rhine wine for Schurz. And they were drinking all night and became, I shouldn't say close friends, but Bismarck, whenever had the chance to invite Karl Schurz, he was impressed how Karl Schurz made a career in America and thought he needed him, even though politically he was so far away from Bismarck. Next question. There are two towns on the western side of... Yes! I take you out for the ultimate bar hopping, Mason. These were the two slides which I missed in my own slide deck. I don't know what happened. 1978, I came to Schleswig, Iowa, Crawford County, doing research, writing my very first college paper. And many older farmers spoke Low German, the countryside dialect in Schleswig-Holstein. They never had been to Schleswig-Holstein or Germany, but their grandparents as babysitters had taught them Low German. So Schleswig, Ray Booman was the mayor, and then Holstein in Ida County. We are even honorary citizens of Holstein, Iowa. Very great question, very Schleswig-Holstein strong roots to this day. There is a direct connection to the 48ers, because 1848ers, because Mason, these founders of Schleswig and Holstein, Schleswig 1819, 99, Holstein 1882. The best centennial ever on this planet was 1982. All these rich, modest Schleswig-Holstein farmers in Holstein had invited us, drove us around in a Cadillac Eldorado convertible at the parade, a 1 week day and night party in Holstein, unforgettable. Next question, are you familiar with the house barn in DeWitt, Iowa? It is Manning, Iowa, which had the first house barn from Schleswig-Holstein. And we had even the pleasure to organize the movement of that very first house barn, Manning, Iowa, founded 1881 by Schleswig-Holsteiners. Yes, and I'm very much aware of the DeWitt house barn. It's the best German-American friendship, these house barn concepts. Thank you for the question, Hege.
Well, I don't see any more in the chat, and we'll give folks another minute or two, Yogi.
There is one more now.
Looks like one just dropped.
My great-grandfather was a 48er who settled in Clinton County, yes, north of Devonport. He served in the German army who fought against the Danes, yes. He fled Husum to Hamburg, to New York, then finally to Clinton, where there are other German groups out of Devonport. Yes, the Clinton 1848ers, not as many as Scott County and Devonport, but this is a classic 1848er story. Husum is on west of Flensburg at the North Sea, low and high tide, and the North Sea is part of the Atlantic. Baby shrimps is the Hall of Fame in Husum at the West Coast, where the great-grandfather of Stuart came from. There were finally 1848ers who survived and came back for the dedication of that 4-ton monument in 1898, downtown Devonport at the Mississippi. Some of them came from California because of the good climate and so on. So there are not Schleswig-Holstein huge groups outside of Devonport. But when Geta and I had the pleasure of founding January 3rd, 1989, the American Schleswig-Holstein Heritage Society, soon we had out of 30 states members, all with roots to Schleswig-Holstein, a lot of fun, many big events. Several other family members immigrated from Lower Saxony and Bavaria. Yes, the language on the countryside in northern Germany, that's not Lower Saxony and Bavaria, is called Low German. It's not low in terms of quality. These are the lowlands. Northern Germany is flat like a table, like Nebraska. And we say, today we can see who will visit us tomorrow. Low German, yes, German states in the 1817, 1880s. Meldorf. Have you published the history? Yeah, I have ancestors from Marne, Hamburg, and Meldorf. Yeah, Marne, Meldorf, all in Schleswig-Holstein, where there's similar pressures in neighboring German states. Yes, the political situation, the social and economic pressure all over Europe, but there is no ethnic group like the German immigrants. Over 6 million German-speaking people had left Europe in between 1830 and 1930. No other group is even close to those ethnic group, to those numbers. And when we are traveling for many years here in the Midwest, giving talks, we hardly ever meet a Midwest American who has not a drop of Germanic blood in his veins, and probably in greetings from Scott County, Bill Tubbs. Yeah, Bill is a role model Rotarian, Peace Pipe project. He published with us an impressive book of the Rotary Cook Peace Letters. Bill Tubbs, North Scott Rotary Club, and North Scott newspaper, which he lately sold. Yes, fond memories. And Billy Boy is one of my favorite drinking buddies and Rotarians.
Very good. Yogi, thank you for your time today. And unless there's one more that comes in, it was a pleasure listening to you and hearing the story. And it's obviously pretty clear you have a great passion for that, and a passion for good food and good beer. So, you know, if I ever find myself in that part of the world, certainly I will have to look you up. And but again, thank you for your time today. And I will go ahead and close this as we're almost to 1 o'clock. And Katie, thank you for getting in touch with Yogi at a great presentation and time to discuss today. So with that, please stand and join me as we recite the four-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Northfield Centennial, June 2025. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.